Ndege wanaimba, wanyama wacheza, ni mshangilio.
Harambee na Nyayo,
wito unavuma,
mdogo kwa mkubwa,
pembe zote Kenya, efo kwa raisi kwa kuanzisha mwito wa Nyayo.
And that song, Daima Kenya, one of very many patriotic songs that characterized 24 years of President Daniel Arap Moi's rule. Choirs, choral music was the order of the day, and it was used to rally the country around a cause. And among the people who are in the front line of that administration is seated with us in a panel that includes Njeru Kadhangu, former Runyenjes MP, Koigi Wamare, former Subuke MP, Joseph Kaguthi, former provincial commissioner to whom we are going shortly, Franklin Bett, former State House Controller, and Daniel Arap Moi's last Interior or Internal Security Minister, Julius Ole Sunkuli. And to you, Joseph Kaguthi, before we took the break, you were explaining to us how the provincial administration works. Just wind that up now and tell us specifically how it worked, especially in the promotion of order and what has been described as Moi's firm way of leadership.
Bottom line, it is a hierarchical kind of a system. The assistant chief, the chief, and so forth. That crown, it belongs to the people. But because you are civilized society, is given to that person to help govern that society. And it goes, that's why when you mention about the soccer stick put here, it is an executive arm of government coordinating for the implementation of what was in the manifesto of the party that did win. And they therefore execute. Remember, in their terms of reference, say the provincial commissioner or the district commissioner, one job is interpret government policy to the people in those barazas. Give government feedback on how it's being received. Give members of parliament like them opportunity to air their views when they are talking to their people and give a feedback, respond and give a feedback. Get the heads of departments, to respond to the questions which are being raised at that local level so that the people feel they belong to that government. Now, there's something you said, and I'll allow you to continue executing this. Yes.
There's something you said about the provincial administration serving the party that has won. Basically, there was only one party that could win those days.
Fine.
And the impression was always that there is no separation of the party, that is the Kenya African National Union, KANU, and the provincial administration. Both were one and the same.
That does not lay within the province of the administrator. The administrator looks at what the political leaders have decided. If they decided, and during the campaign, this is the manifesto of the political party called KANU, one state, if it is one state, it is not so much of their business because they are not political. The political heads have already decided. Therefore, individual policies, remember the system which was there, and where it is not there, it has failed very badly. If it is a policy, there is a sessional paper which is debated again in Parliament. Once it's debated in Parliament, it is passed from blue to white paper, sessional paper, is given to the Attorney General who crafts the law. It goes back to Parliament. Once it comes out of Parliament and is signed by the President, because every law even now is made by both the legislature as well as the President, and in the counties, the governor. From there, the civil servants, they now implement it.
Right, and I'll come back to you, but I want to go to the headquarters where the system runs from, and that is the Ministry of Interior. That was the ministry that was, actually, it's not Interior, but Internal Security and Provincial Administration. If you could react to the same question of the perceptions of lack of separation of party from administration.
Well, I must say, the authority lies with what Joseph Kaguthi has said. But I wanted to put in a different perspective. The provincial administration, under the leadership of President Moi, served a number of purposes. First of all, that that aspect of accessibility of government to the grassroots, so that you exactly know how your messages will be relayed both ways, up and down. But I think the use of the hotline, which Franklin managed mainly, was available to the provincial administration, so that Moi did not entirely rely on NSIS or special branches. He received his information also from provincial administration, which was more grassroots oriented and which was not necessarily intelligence, but the raw information.
Right.
But okay. But specifically about the party, I think that the theory, if you are looking at theory of government, government or civil servants, even in the United States, of course, serve the policies of the government of the day. And the provincial administration had simply that mandate. The problem had to be solved politically. Now that there was only one political party, they agitated for another party. And because Moi was a Democrat, he agreed.
And we're going to come to that. There's something you mentioned there, and as one of the ways the administration of former President Moi functioned. He mentioned about hotline, and he specifically referred to you as managing that. Tell us about the hotline.
Every provincial commissioner had that line, and every minister to a certain level had that line. The meaning of that line was for access of the president to these various organs of government without going through, there was also the issue of confidentiality, without going through the normal post office or telecommunication. So it was used specifically for information to be relayed, like when he said early in the morning, he would be talking to the president. He would be talking on that line, a line that is reserved for that purpose. He would just dial and it goes straight to Moi. Moi would dial straight to Kaguthi and it goes straight to Kaguthi. And when they are through, that is it, then another person would call in. So it was simply meant to facilitate
a safe line.
It was literally a hotline. Line. I'm told even the handset was actually red.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I had a white one.
Mine was green.
Yours was green.
Yeah. So it's not.
But mulio yake, it was special. Ikigonga hapa, every other call which was making the noise there.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
Oh yes.
It had a different ringtone.
Yes.
Which was meant to alert you. It could be the president on the line, or it could be the deputy president on the line. So it was meant to assist, facilitate access of information as quickly as possible.
I'm sure the smartphone generation is finding this almost ridiculous. The mobile phones are not there.
They were not there.
They were not there.
They were not there. So at that time, it was the mobile, the best communication network at that time.
Right. And let's go back to Kaguthi. What sort of instructions would come through? And I'm not asking you to divulge government secrets.
All sorts of information will come through. So, like an incident like this one of Kakamega. Once it has struck, the nearest administrator gets the information. The DC is informed. He goes to the site, he briefs the PC, and because it's of a national interest, so I would take it up. I'll first of all check. Suppose where is Mzee? If he's inside his office, is he having people? If he's free, then I dial straight away. Tuko na shida hii na hii na hii imefanyika, and this is the cause of it, and this is the action we are taking. He now knows that is happening. He is in charge of the country. The commissioner of police would have it. The chief of general staff would have it. Ministers, particularly those who are of you remember the government is divided into two.
Yes.
Departments that govern and the departments that deliver services. Those departments that govern, they have that access, so that immediately they are able to communicate. And even the departments that the emergency response systems, who are the is a security teams, and it's a hierarchical. The province has a security committee, just like Nairobi has a security committee, which is chaired by normally by the vice president. and it goes down to the province, to the district, and they meet in a certain systematic way. So there are certain areas which are definitely very, like, I give you an example. 1974, we saw the people in Rwanda. They were crossing Tanzania, and they were all coming across through Isebania to Kisii. You don't take a decision quickly on that. You consult. I get in touch with the regional commissioner at the other side, and I have informed the president what I'm doing. So on Boxing Day, we are at the border, and we take decisions to security committees of the other country and the other country. Citizens will not be involved on that kind of thing, and it will not go to areas where it will be diverse, because we have internal enemies and external enemies.
Right.
Yes.
And I want to move to this end of my table, because Koigi Wawamwere, we spoke extensively with you when we were shooting Moi and Muigai, a documentary we did not too long ago. And I remember you telling me that you got to interact a lot with the former president, Daniel Arap Moi. On some occasions, was the red line involved?
I don't know. You know, what has been described here is a system that I was not familiar with, but I was very familiar with its results. But how the system itself worked, I was not let into the secret. But now that I have heard, I can understand why Mr. Kaguthi just told us to be careful about what we say here. Because according to him, a lot of trouble could come from it.
I didn't hear him say that. I didn't hear him say that. Honorable Koigi, I want us to progress this conversation. And my question was, to simplify it, your first interaction with Daniel Arap Moi. How did that come about?
Now, what I'm trying to explain, and it's important, because if up to now we can have Kaguthi say that you should be careful what you say, that is intimidation. That's how dictatorship worked. That's how the provincial administration worked. But I'm saying I was not part of it. But I would like to explain the reason why we came here is to describe. It's really what we think about. No.
I want to assure you.
Let me be of help to you. I'm sympathetic to the family. I'm not in the government.
Yes, that's fine.
Now, what I wanted to explain here is that we didn't come here to discuss Moi the person. We came here to discuss, according to me, the institution that Moi was, the political institution. That is what I think would be of interest to
Now, we'll also talk about Moi the person.
Yeah,
you can't separate the man from the institution.
Because when you do, immediately you'll be accused of causing trouble.
He is the anchor.
And we don't want that.
The anchor.
But if
there's no trouble, Honorable Koigi. Please proceed, make a point on when did you meet Daniel Arap Moi first, and how did that come about? Was the hotline used? I spoke to Martin Shikuku in the same documentary we're talking about, and he told me about his interaction with State House. It was through the hotline.
Let me tell you, the first time I met Moi, where that was, it was at Muranga. Matiba had organized a Harambe, and many people had turned up there, and I wanted to meet the team of Moi, Gigi, Kibaki, and Matiba. So I traveled to Muranga, and fortunately I met the four persons together, and they gave me a very good start because I wanted to go back into politics, although I had been rigged and subsequently detained. So when Moi asked me whether I was still interested in going to Parliament, I told him yes, I'm still interested. He said, go begin your campaigns, there will be nobody to rig your election. That's how I met Moi for the first time.
Which year was that?
But before that, I must say that we had been communicating. That was 1979. But before that, in 1975 and before, we had been communicating with Moi, because he was in Nakuru. Nakuru politically was controlled by a political mafia that was by another name, Gema leadership, which seemed to have problems with his accession to power, and also had a problem with our desire to go to Parliament, and the kind of politics that we were doing. Politics that were described as communistic, as revolutionary, and Kagode has just added another term to it, radicalized. Although radicalized just came.
He didn't say that. I didn't hear him say that. But
no, you didn't hear. But
I didn't hear him say.
But
say
I'm
that.
willing. So what was it that we were doing that it could make an entire provincial administration be so scared of us? We were talking about equality of the people. We were talking about unemployment. We were talking about landlessness. These are the problems, unemployment. These are the problems that made the system, the government system, consider us as dangerous and qualify us for detention.
You're informing us on a very, very critical historical points, and I want to get it right here, because if you speak of 75 as the year that you first met the former president.
No. 79. 75 is the time that I was detained.
And you were in conversation.
74 was the first year I ran for elections.
Right.
Having been rigged and detained, I wanted to make a comeback.
Right, and I want to hear where you stood between 74 and 79, because the period you are describing is the period when we had the Change the Constitution movement.
Absolutely.
Which was pushed by, among others, the former Member of Parliament for Subukia.
Yeah, and that is why we had a closeness with Moi, because we were both underdogs. I was, in the sense that I was not wanted in Parliament. I was accused of being a rebel, more so because I was a youth. So what was my business with the leadership?
So is it correct to say that right here in this table we just established a link between yourself and President Moi, especially in terms of the beginnings of your political career?
Yes. That's how it began.
You were allies.
And later it became even closer, because there was a time that Moi invited me to his house. We discussed a great deal of politics. And I can say here that my relationship with Moi was one of friendship initially. Then Moi became president. And I don't fear to announce that, in fact, he offered me a position in the cabinet, which I turned down because I wanted to spare some time asking questions from my constituents before I could get distracted.
Who would do that? Everybody at the time used to jump to those cabinet appointments.
Yeah,
why would you turn it down?
Because I had promised my constituents that I would talk about their problems in Parliament. Now I'm being offered a position in the cabinet, which I knew. But a cabinet position would allow you to solve those problems. No. I knew that indeed that was not the case, because we had a minister. We had ministers in Nakuru, and I know they had not been able to do much. Once you join the government, and say, for instance, I saw Mwidaga coming to me to ask, and asking me to ask questions for him, questions about his constituents. In fact, at one time, I was an MP for 2 constituencies, almost concurrently, because the minister was ineffective. He knew that he could get assistance from me, and I was happy to serve both constituents, because, I mean, after all, my commitment was generally to Kenyan people, not necessarily just my constituents. But then the problem is, when you took a position like that, you are regarded as an enemy. When you said the emperor is naked, because sometimes we had to say the emperor was naked, we were regarded as enemies. When
the emperor was offering you a job.
Yeah, very good. But that was not the only time we met. We continued living after I had said that I was not ready to take there. There was a time that I was offered land, also by the president. But when I went for that land, DC Ogol told me that I could not get the land because I had gone to Parliament and talked too much. And he was telling me, if you want a piece of land, for God's sake, watch your mouth. Otherwise, it's not going to be possible. These are the things that we were critical about. And that's why we were saying sometimes the emperor was naked. And when naked, it was only fair that we could be able to point that out. Please also remember, and those are not the only things that we talked about with the president. I remember asking him whether he would agree to be Joshua in our setup. He asked me, what do you mean? And I told him, because President Kenyatta just died. He's the one who took the nation from Egypt across the Red Sea into the desert, and then died before the flock reached Canaan. And I was saying, now that you have taken power from Kenyatta, can you please become our Joshua? And he looked at me and gave me no answer.
In our previous interview, you didn't tell me he died in the desert. You actually told me he crossed with his family alone.
No, yeah. What I'm saying is that some people...
I'm going to come to...
I was not talking about the entry of the president into Canaan. Yeah. I'm talking about the masses. It is the masses that I was fighting for. I was not fighting for the elite. They didn't need me to fight for their interests at all. And so,
I'm coming back to you because I want to hear where the breaking point with Daniel Arap Moi came. I want to hear where the relationship
how it ended.
No, we're coming to that. But let's go to Njeru Kathangu. How did you meet Moi?
First, I wanted to talk about the 5 Mois I talked about. And I thought you'd give me that time.
Yes, and you met all of them.
Because I've met a lot of Mois, including the 5 I'm talking about. You know, first of all, I said that from 1955 to 1956, that was Moi's formation period. One, Moi was a very lucky man. And he's very lucky to have lived also to 96 years. Kenyans were living for 42, 47, 50, and they go. But the man has sustained his life to 96 years, maybe more. But he was lucky that he was not the man that was selected to be MP for Village Co in the Rift Valley, but John Oletameno. John Oletameno got late.
And he was replaced by Moi.
And he was replaced by Moi.
Yes.
First, on the 10th of October 1955, Moi took the oath to serve in Legico. From then to 1966, Moi became a very lucky man in that house. He became the man to chair KADU. He became the man to visit Kenyatta and organize about how Kenyatta would come to lead it until Kenyatta, in fact, they built the house for Kenyatta in Ishaweri, right? But
that sounds like hard work, not luck.
No, no, that is luck. Because it is Reverend Gato that took him. He went and said, well, to Kawana Kenyatta. And they went to Marara to see Kenyatta. And they discussed this. Would you agree to come and lead Kandu? Yes. You know, Kenyatta was also a very easy-going man, where luck beckoned.
He agreed to lead Kandu.
Yes, but in Marara, when he came out here, he said, ngoja kidogo hata Kandu nasikia inanitaka. You know, so, but what I'm saying, that was time for formation, you know, until Moi led his group to cross the floor and dissolve KADU.
1964.
1964. And from then on, a problem started emerging that Jaramogi, who was now the man, started seeing a different game. But that is how Moi started emerging. Yeah. Now, from 1966 to 1978, Moi was a very serious victim of the people that did not want him to ever take the presidency. And he agreed. In fact, during this time, I would say seriously that I have never seen a great, humble coward like Daniel Moi. Because of his cowardice and his humility, everybody would poke his nose, spit on him, whatever, and he would not talk about those things.
The Gorokos.
The Gorokos, everybody. And because of that, I think he gained admiration, not only around Kenyatta's circle, but also elsewhere, to people who would pull strings to have Kenyatta make decisions about something. And that is how the constitutional campaign in 1976 was stopped, so that Moi could be able to take reins in those 90 days we talk about, in case the president went. I'm talking about Kenyatta's game, that from 1978 for the next 4 years, Moi was trying and tried very hard to learn about how these characters manage. In fact, he left the Mercedes, the 500 Mercedes, to be riding my friend...
The combi.
George.
Yeah.
Yes.
My friend Gigi Kariuki.
The van.
And they would go, not the van, the presidential...
Limousine, yes.
limousine.
Yes.
And they would go saluting everybody, everywhere, you know. And he left it. Learning. And when he had completed the learning, then kukaingia kisagaa katika parliament, where somebody is saying, we have got a traitor here. And out of that traitor person, and from then on, then Moi started in 1983, you know, after that attended coup, crushing people. In fact, there was a small question that was asked here. I think there are some things that are organized by the state to allow the state managers to crush what they call potentials.
Rebellion, eh?
So you think it was not real?
Just hold on, because you are discussing that the fourth Moi. You are now on Moi
You know,
number 4.
now I am on fourth Moi.
Yes, please
You
get to number 5, because I have some questions for
Yes,
you.
and number 5 is 1986 to 2002, because he took that period from 1986 to 1992. First of all, you know, to make sure that there wasn't one character that would come to claim leadership here. He put all of them into prisons. They went looking for Koigi Ndani, Matiba Ndani, Fulani Ndani, Kabangu Ndani, everybody Ndani. And Sunguru was very happy, by the way. You know, and I'll tell you why. But the tipping point, Sunguri remembers this. The tipping point was 1990 to 1992, where Moi, because I think of his presence in the church, his presence, sometimes pretending, and he would carry all the Bibles, about 3 Bibles.
I'm not sure about that.
Oh, one Bible or 3.
I'm not sure about that. There are a lot of photographs of president or the former president, and we've not seen any that is carrying 3 Bibles.
But
I want to ask you a question, because you've gone through all the 5, and you described 66 to 1978 as a coward, and then 78 to 83, a crusher. How can a coward crush?
Yeah, he did not do it alone. I'll tell you. In 2002, when he actually engaged my brother Sunkuli.
Which year?
2002.
No, we're in 78 to 83.
I'm talking about 2002. It's an example I'm giving you.
Yes.
It is not Moi who did these things, some of these things. In fact, people did these things to please him.
Right. And
let me just say, don't worry, because we are not fighting, we are only discussing. And you know, 2002, on the 6th of February 2002, I was visiting the Vatican, the Pope. While I was waiting at the corridors with Cardinal Sodano to go and see John Paulo, he whispered, "Excuse me, something has just been announced. You lead a football team."
Raise your whisper for the microphone.
Yeah, you lead a football team in Kenya, and it is a militia group. And I said, "What are you talking about?" Yeah.
That's 202.
202.
Yes.
And so the man brought me a small list. It had 18 groups which had been banned, right? And Runyenje's football club was one of them. Among them, Ugekes, Amachumas, what, 48 brothers, and signed by Sunguri. The Sunguru is here. Not Moi. Sunguru is here. So when I came back,
Runyenje's football club.
Imagine that. So when I came back here, I got that Kumbe, Sunguri thought that Mimi, I'm just a commander of another group that could overthrow government.
And so you deserve.
And so what I'm saying is this, that it is not Daniel Toroitich Arab Moi that was actually crashing. It is his lieutenants who were doing it. And you know, even in the detentions that we went to, some of those things were non-existent, but we still served detention.
You've named a potential crusher. I don't know why to call him that. Honorable Sunkuli.
I think I have a right of reply.
Yes.
And the right arises because, first of all, Njeru Gatangu and myself go to the same Catholic church.
True.
And we always kneel at the same bench.
Almost next.
And I didn't know that he can come to Kenyan television and say an untruth. First of all, there was never a time that we tried to crush him at the Vatican at all. And I have to go to records because, as you know, there were times, definitely, so that I don't also become a liar, that we did outlaw some organizations like the Jeshi la Mzee, like the
Runyenjes Football Club. Was it one?
I don't know. I have to look at the records because I don't think that anybody would have
other departments.
And of course, I will not be here cheating.
But I also think that Daniel Arap Moi also has a right of reply. Unfortunately, he's not here. But I don't think that it is right.
So you can reply for him,
I don't think that it is right to say that Daniel Arap Moi...
The specific accusation from...
Like some politicians...
Honorable Sunkuli, the specific accusation from Njeru Gatangu is you signed...
No, I don't...
something banning Runyenjes Football Club.
I don't remember that because that was not even... excuse me. That was not even... That was not even an error for doing those kind of things. We were past the era that...
And you didn't want to remember, of course.
I would like to remember. You could give me the reports now. But I wanted to... Don't let this escape Linus. Because he says Moi was carrying Bibles. I think Moi did not wear religion like a cloth. No. I think if you look at his life, actually, it was governed by religion. What you are referring to as cowardice, he got this from the Bible. And he used it as a good foundation for his 24 years of power. If he was not humble, because he's not cowardice,
he refused to be a Joshua.
It is humility. Joshua, we were in Canaan already. He brought us there. So I think you know it depends on if you remained in the desert. Kenya crossed from Kenyatta to the next
people are still in the desert.
And to multiple.
Gentlemen, we'll stick to facts around this table. That's why I want to bring in Franklin Bett, who managed the president's diary for very many years as control of State House. Hold on, Njeru, because I want to clear the issue you've raised of the president carrying 3 Bibles. Is that possible, Honorable Bett?
In that vehicle, which Moi was riding every Sunday into church, is 1 Bible and a hymn book. I never at any one time placed more than 1 Bible and 1 hymn book. If it was more, it was a hymn book in Kalenjin or a hymn book in English.
General, there's a difference there, isn't there?
Yeah, well, I like the way he's trying to put differences. But when you look at a president carrying books and he has got 3, what do you think they are? Because and he kept on referring to them.
He was genuinely a religious person.
Well, I don't know. But what I wanted to say, Linus, because there is no way, I cannot have any barometer for how religious people are. For example, like I'm saying, and he has said it, in fact, we go to Holy Family Basilica, and sometimes we're on the same bench.
So you want to walk back from the words because you use the words.
I'm not.
You use the words pretended.
I'm not walking out. I'm only simply saying this. Remember, even in the same Bible, there is that who is standing at the gate, and there is that one who is at the front. One of them is saying, "My God, don't think about this one. The one standing behind there, that one cannot."
Like, but are you denying that Moi was an evangelical?
What I'm saying, sir. What I'm saying,
not a member of the
What I'm saying, sir. All of us go to church moved by some kind of spiritual thing. Either go seek forgiveness for things that we have done, or if not, genuinely go and tell God about the things that you like to do and want Him to bless you.
Yes, and just pause for a moment because you speak of forgiveness, and I want to go to our control room now and run a bite of President Moi. Talking of forgiveness and apology, let's listen to former President Moi here.
Nitaondoka kwa siasa ya moto mina kwa raia mwema, lakini wale wanaozingatia kuongoza, musiweke Kenya chini. msiweke msingi wa siasa zenu kwa chuki. Kama yuko mtu ametukana mimi, namsamehe. Na kama yuko mtu ambaye nimesema chochote ambaye kimeumiza roho yake, unisamehe.
Jero.
So,
you heard him?
yes, I heard him. When I came out of prison, 15th of February, 15th of February 1992, George Anyona, Oyugi, Godwa Kariuki and myself. And Godwa Kariuki is still alive, and Edward Oyugi is still around. I told the gentlemen, my friends, we have just come out. And I left Koigi in that prison. Him.
Yes.
I told my friends, look, if we are going to be free out here, there is one thing we must do. One, forgive Moi and all those people that participated in this incarceration. Why? Because all of them, according to me, participated in agitation for multipartyism. Moi for giving instructions, police for arresting us, and the people of Kenya got hurt and decided to start fighting for us. That's why we are here. According to me, that particular tripartite action that the president has done this, the police have done this, and we have done this, makes multi-party possible. Is it possible, therefore, to forgive? Some of them say no, and I said, I hereby forgive Moi.
And I want to go to the context of that remark, very, very profound remark by President Moi. And I want to bring in Franklin Bett and Joseph Kagothi. Starting with Franklin, you were by the side of this president, especially towards the end of his term. And one of the big questions was whether he's willing to even retire, because there was speculation that he would want to stay on. And then suddenly started making speeches like this and asking people to be forgiving and basically winding up his term.
Like I said earlier, he allowed Section 2A to be scrapped. And the reason why he did is because he had listened to the voices coming out of the country. He had also listened to the voices coming outside the country. Because I remember that day, after everybody has spoken, that we are not going to remove Section 2A. He stood up and said, I have listened to you very carefully. And I know what is in front of us.
And just pause, because I want to refresh your mind with that bite from the Moi International Sports Center, Kasarani, I think, what is it, 4th or 5th December 1991, if I got,
yes.
If I got that, 1991 actually.
Yes.
Let's listen to Daniel Arap Moi.
Shida ambayo mlionayo, ijapokuwa mnasema sisi ndani ya KANU kuna mambo kadha, hamjui kwamba ndani yenu wenyewe kuna fold, ili tuone hawa walio katika siasa, wale walio watumishi wa serikali, sisi tuseme kwamba tufungue, tuondoe ile section ya katiba ya Kenya ya 2A.
Correct?
Yes.
He prepared his statement ahead, but he also prepared the minds of the people after listening to them. Not one province, Linus, stood for no change of the constitution. All of them across that amphitheater, except a bit of the coast province, maybe because of their reasons back there at the coast. But when he now read it out and giving reason why he was doing so, which was part of listening to what they had been saying, he was a listener. He wasn't closed in his mind. So at the end of the day, Moi said, I have allowed this to happen because of ABCD, which he has also explained himself.
But wasn't he under a lot of pressure? That is the time that the donor community was...
That is true. That's why I'm saying he
The Berlin Wall
listened. He
had
listened.
collapsed.
So is it accurate
He
then to
listened
say
to our
that
own
this
men,
was his...
our own men and women.
He was doing this out of his own volition?
Yeah, he was doing out of his own volition, but after listening, like I said, he was a listener. So he has listened to our people within the country. He has listened to the diplomatic community, and he said, "Let us change this constitution." And you had the ululation, the celebration after he had done so.
Right, Kaguthi, he was a good listener?
Let me say three things. One, when I went to Kisumu as provincial commissioner in 1993, it was 10 days after the 1992 election government was formed.
Right.
And because Nyanza was like the headquarter of the opposition, I decided that my archivist, Museum, Kathrima, go to the Kenya National Archives for 3 weeks and get me all the activities Mzee Moi had when he was vice president. I was given a dossier. So when I go, and I never went to any constituency without the honorable member of parliament agreeing so that we be together, so that he can articulate the people. So when they say that we intimidate, no, it's not right. Number two, the activities Mzee Moi had in the whole country when Mzee Jomo Kenyatta was not mobile, was not moving very fast. He was more or less Gatundu, Nakuru, and Mombasa. Mzee Moi was very active across. Take it from me, 12 years. For me, I take Mzee Moi 12 years and then 24, 36. That is how I have looked at him throughout my service. Number two, when you talk about forgive, it's the same statement you remember with Mzee Kenyatta, with the colonial administrators who are oppressing us.
Forgive but don't forget.
Forgive and don't forget. Interpret that statement of Mzee Moi in this way. He was leading a system. Our president now is having a system of 800,000 workers. And all the things they are doing, the Assistant Chiefs, Huko, all those, they are part of, because the government is teamwork. So when he says, kama tumeumiza, kama nimeumiza, because it is the system I established, you look at it from that angle. That's the way I looked at it. Anything that anasema kwa hivyo, I look at it very broadly. And finally, interpret all the activities like the way Katangu has enumerated against the background of what was happening that time.
The five boys.
Yes, because he took over. When he was running, he was within the colonial administration. It was illegible. And you remember he kept on telling us, Mzungu alikuuliza, who told you to think? You remember that kind of system?
Yes, I remember that.
So you interpret whatever happened at that time in the context of the global. Remember the Cold War? The Cold War. The overturning of the governments of the continent. You remember the way, the age of independence. Then all of a sudden, then you get the struggles. We had even here Kasarani. We had one of the Lumumba Institute. It had to be closed. You interpret it against the background of what Honorable Koigi is saying. You are labeling because you have this and this view. You remember the Marxism, the this and this and this. You interpret it against that background. Yeah. This one of the Cold War, 1988, all the way to 1992, the Cold War was over. American became the only power, isn't it? They had the Paris Club. They would finger the ministers. You remember Kones had a problem because of a statement he issued. They would go to renegotiate this. Tunafinywa hapa. You remember the structural adjustment program as an operator by myself, because I was within the executive operating. Right. So I would like to say this. Do not look at these 5 things in isolation. Look at them as the situation which was there, and he was reacting. Gaddafi. Why did Gaddafi have to die? Because there is something that he was moving across the whole of this continent, and he had to die. 1984, Mzee Moi said, I believe in the Organization of African Unity. The states got to have like the United States. And he started being on the microphone, microscope.
Right, and you mentioned Koigi, and I want him to come in now and weigh in on some of the issues you are raising. It all started with the removal of Section 2A. Was it willful or was it compelled by circumstances?
It was compelled. He talked about Cold War, and I think it was very good that he did, because we said that the reason why some of us were locked up and detained was not because we had broken any law, but because we were seen as communists, others as socialists. We were even called fellow travelers on the road to socialism. There was no label that was spared us in an attempt to make sure that we were locked up. But when Cold War ended, there was no longer any financial
But just in fairness to history, Moi released you from detention in 1978.
In 1978, so 78, yes, not
yes.
Moi. He didn't release us. The Constitution said that when the president died, all the people that he will have locked up will be set free.
That's of which Constitution?
Yes, the Constitution that we had then.
It said that.
It's not that, it was not out of mercy that Moi released us. In any case, so I think you are wrong to think that because Moi was not even in power at the, well, he was in power because he
assumed office after the death
he assumed
of
the
Jomo
office,
Kenyatta, yes.
And we had absolutely no quarrel with Moi at that point. But then you asked me, where did it start, or your quarrel with Moi? And yes. remember that Moi locked me up for 9 years. So nobody can lock you up, Kai, and be your friend, because you don't go there for a picnic. You go there, you are taken there to die. And so anybody who locks you up without seeking an explanation for reasons that you have not been allowed to explain really is doing you an injustice that you cannot forget or forgive. The other thing is that when I met Moi at his home, he actually told me, after I had insisted on the Joshua issue and talking...
So before or after detention? Please.
No, that was after detention.
After detention.
After I had gone to Parliament.
Right.
In the very first month, he invited me to his home. And we talked a lot about many things. But when we did, we couldn't agree. He issued to me a very veiled threat that usiamshe kijana, usiamshe walalao au talala wewe. When I discovered what that meant, it meant that I would get locked up if I continued to what they termed as inciting people. If you want to incite people, and I told him that once, when we were discussing, once what amounted to incitement was meetings that I had organized and arranged for people to speak in those meetings, and all I would do is respond to their queries. And the police came together with the DO and shut down those meetings. And he said that I was asking people to incite their MP. Can you hear about? Have you ever heard of such a thing? But these were the things that for which we were getting into trouble. You remember the people called 7 Bearded Sisters. I was a member of that.
You're one of the sisters, yes.
Yeah, I was one of the sisters. Yeah. And we had been naive enough to assume that the reason why we wanted to go to Parliament was to be able to use parliamentary immunity to campaign or to fight for the rights of the people that we represented in Parliament. And in fact, one reason why we wanted to be in Parliament was because we believed there was immunity. Outside Parliament, you could not do anything. I'll give you an example that I used to write a weekly column for Sunday Post. And every time that I wrote that column, I would be visited by the police. Police who at one point even insisted on sleeping in my house. And they would sleep there until morning. Can you imagine that kind of terror? And then in the morning, I would make them tea, and they would go back to the station, and I would go to the school where I taught. But it is that kind of intimidation that made us wish to have changes in the government and in the society and in the politics of the country. The other thing that actually made it difficult for me to kind of continue to be in friendship with Moi was the question of one-party dictatorship. Because how can you be a patriot and allow a country to have dictatorship, which is not even concealed in any way, it is open?
But even as a member of the Six Bearded Sisters, you accepted the arrangement of a single-party
We did not. We did not.
You were a member of parliament.
Yes. And in fact, I will say there were only two people who seemed happy with the arrangement. And that was the president and Jonjo. Everybody else was complaining. I remember facing the former president, Mwai Kibaki, at the canteen. And I asked him why these things, why was this motion being brought to the House of inserting Section 2A into the Constitution? And I can remember him saying to me, I wish these things could come quickly so that we can assume our lives. There was terror in the House like I have never seen.
Right.
And those are the things that made it very difficult. I mean, how do you accommodate dictatorship and claim to be walking on the right path? That's why we had this disagreement with President Moi.
Did you ever make up? Because I want to go to the rest of it. Did you ever repair your relations with,
we had a discussion with him. And I told him that according to me, the period you have been out of power has proven clearly that it's possible to govern this country without detaining anybody, without having people tortured.
He passed on today. Had you fixed your differences?
No, that's what I'm trying to explain. That according to him, there were no differences to be fixed. He believed that he was right and that I was wrong. I was breaking the law. Even Jonjo also believed that I was wrong and they were right. So it is a matter that has been left. The other question that I asked them was, who will be responsible for the economic mess that we have had in our country? Remember, we were supposed to be at power with Singapore, with Malaysia, with Indonesia, and the other countries. So I asked him, who is responsible? Is it us or you? My insistence was that, in fact, the mess that we have in this country must be blamed on the Moi, Jonjo, Kibaki generation.
You mentioned something about the Constitution.
That's what I believe.
You had asked him about the Constitution.
The release.
The change.
Yes.
The change of the 2A. And I wanted to put just one sentence, that the reason why in 1982, June, the constitutional amendment came in was because that time, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga and John Janyona were going to announce the formation of Kenya African Socialist Alliance.
Yes.
And so I think it had threatened. So they were arrested, detained the same day. Now, a few days later, then there was, not a few days, I think 2 or 3 days later, then there was the bill that was launched in Parliament, and it was led by my friends Kibaki and Matiba.
Yeah.
And it was
Matiba was not.
It was
Matiba was not in Parliament.
It was Charles Njonjo and
Charles Njonjo and
Kibaki. Yes.
Yes.
Only two people had been
that's
allowed
a lot of history, but I want us to come to more recent history and
comment on this 2A.
No, we'll come to that, Honorable Sunkuli, because I want to go to Robert now, who will give us a soundbite on Moi endorsing Uhuru Kenyatta's candidate some years ago.
Nataja moja kwanza, alafu watafanya na wengine. Na huyu ndiye Uhuru Kenyatta. Haya, Kwa nini mimi nasema mzee Uhuru Kenyatta atakuwa mzee wa mji hata kama ni kijana hivi?
Franklin Bet, what was going on here? Because there was an awkward silence after he mentioned Uhuru Kenyatta, because the crowd seemed to be unbelieving. And I'm going to press you again to reveal secrets that you may not have authority to release, but I'm sure you can tell us, how did Daniel Arap Moi come about with candidate Uhuru Kenyatta by overlooking very experienced politicians in Kanu that included his longtime vice president?
Linus, this one I will not be able to address, to look into, because at that time I was out of the country. I think I was serving in Australia. So I had it like you had. But my thinking is there must have been some lobbying amongst politicians.
Then I'll interrupt you there because I want to go to Sunkuli, who was Minister for Internal Security at the time. And in fact, you rode around the country during this time of the endorsement of Uhuru Kenyatta. It looked like a surprise to Kanu Party.
Well, it was. It was really a surprise. But we were the people whom Moi first told this issue. And I think it was myself who announced the matter in Kilgoris for the first time. And there were backroom toings and froings on this issue. And talking about recent history is not always very easy, because you don't know what to say and not what not to say.
It should be easier.
But I think the candidates that were on the table at that particular time was Uhuru Kenyatta and George Saitoti. And I know that the biggest problem was Moi himself assessed Saitoti and assessed him out of the candidature. I think, Linus, you were there in Kilgoris when he told Saitoti,
Rafiki too.
You're my good friend.
Yes.
You're my good friend. But taking everything into account, it looks to me like it's not possible. And I said in another interview, I don't know whether I'm bold enough to say that on TV, that Moi had a soft spot for a Kikuyu candidate.
A Kikuyu or for a particular person?
Let him
a Kikuyu candidate. Because when we sat down with him, he did believe that it was necessary at this particular point to get somebody from Central Province because of the stability of the country. And no matter what you say, Moi was always interested in the stability of Kenya. In fact, the removal of Section 2A was actually out of the stability, because of his concern for stability of the country. Because Moi read Michael Brandon very well, the book So Rough a Wind.
So Rough a Wind.
And there was so rough a wind. And no country, by the way, that was affected by the wind that came from Eastern Europe, no country survived.
Now let's settle this issue.
I'm going to come to that issue.
Because you have left it hanging, and I want to guide you.
I was bringing you to that one.
Okay.
And saying that, so, having written off George Saitoti, the candidate who he had at that particular time, having discussed it with different players, was Uhuru Kenyatta. And you must realize that he had actually brought up Uhuru Kenyatta to that level because he brought him into an organization of government and then put him on a lift that took him quickly into the interior parts of government.
Which is why I'm questioning the impression you are creating of a sudden decision.
I'm not saying sudden. I'm saying putting it to the public.
It sounds meticulous. He became chairman of Kenya Tourism Board. He then became nominated member of parliament, replacing Makto. He then became minister for local authority, all in very quick succession.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound to me like Moi changed his mind overnight about George Saitoti and decided here is Uhuru Kenyatta.
But I'm sure you understood me. The announcement was sudden, definitely. But if you look at it carefully, he had made up his mind that George Saitoti was not going to be his successor, and therefore Uhuru Kenyatta was going to be. Introducing this to the public and to those who had already expected to become president, I think was not an easy thing for him. And you can see the results. That in fact, that decision throughout both Uhuru and throughout those who wanted to be president, and they created a totally new scenario of the opposition taking over the government.
And Uhuru lost the subsequent election.
Yep.
Yeah. But can I say something?
Yes.
And what I want to say is about Moi restoring the multi-party out of his magnanimity. To be quite honest, we must be fair here and accept and admit that neither Moi nor other politicians like Kibaki supported the multi-party campaign until it was too late.
But the
when it was obvious
was done by Moi.
That he did it because he was the president.
No, but
if I was the president,
that was wisdom.
I would have done it. There was no wisdom.
Sounds like this argument requires more time than I have.
But it is wrong for him.
Because we're going to take a break, a very short break.
The other thing that I was
we're taking a break, and we'll come back. When we come back, we'll be concluding with the politics of recent times, as well as the legacy of Daniel Arap Moi as communicated from this very, very diverse panel that is here around
something
the table
very diverse,
tonight. We're taking a short break.
It's a break.
Diverse.
No, break, you know.